Hello, dear students. In this video, we are going to have The Prisoner of Zenda. This is a novel by Anthony Hope. Let's recognize the characters. Those are the main characters of the story. Look here, we have two main characters, Rodolph Razendel and Prince Rodolph of Ruritania. This is Princess Flavia, Sabt, Fritz Antoinette de Maubert. Let's know more about the characters. We have two main families in the novel. The first family, the Razendons or Burlesdons, and the Elphbergs. This is the second family. The Razendons or Burlesdons, this family consists of four main characters: Rodolph Razendel, Rouse, Robert Razendel or Lord Burlesdon, and Countess Amelia. The other family, the Elphbergs, consists of the main character, King Rodolph or Rodolph V, and Duke Michael and Princess Flavia. So we have two main families. Each family has character whose name is Rodolph, but in the Razendel's family, we call this character Rodolph Razendel, and in the other family, we call this character King Rodolph or Rodolph V. Okay? Let's move to the next. Here are characters. These are details about the main characters or the main characters in detail. Let's start with Burlesdon family. The first character here in this family, Rodolph Razendel, an Englishman of 29 years, younger brother of Lord Burlesdon and brother-in-law of Lady Burlesdon, a skilled horseman, a good shot, a competent swordsman, well-educated, independent man who speaks English, German, and French perfectly, adventure lover who considers opportunities as possibilities. Lord Burlesdon or Robert, the second character, Lord Burlesdon or Robert Razendel. Lord of Burlesdon, older brother of Rodolph Razendel, and a very active person in public affairs. Lady Burlesdon or Rose Robert Razendel, wife of Lord of Burlesdon and sister-in-law of Rodolph Razendel. Rodolph's friends. We have two main friends, George Featherly, friend of Rodolph Razendel in Paris, diplomat in the British Embassy at Paris. The other friend, Bertrand, friend of Rodolph Razendel in Paris, poet and journalist in Critic, a newspaper in Paris, a resident of Paris. Elphberg family. Rodolph Elphberg, King of Ruritania to be, son of King Rodolph, sixth cousin and fiancé of Princess Flavia, half-brother of Black Michael, Crown Prince of Ruritania. Black Michael, Duke of Streltsau, son of King Rodolph VI from a morganatic marriage, cousin of Princess Flavia and half-brother of Rodolph Elphberg, Duke of the State of Streltsau and owner of the Castle of Zenda. Princess Flavia, cousin and fiancée of Rodolph Elphberg, immediate heir to the throne of Ruritania. Kingsman, Colonel Sabt, most experienced and faithful servant of the King Rodolph V and the protector of the House of Oldenburg. Fritz von Trallenheim, faithful servant of the King Rodolph V, at his attendant, distant relative of Count Stanislaus von Trallenheim. Count Helga von Strophizen, lady in waiting to Princess Flavia and beloved of Fritz von Trallenheim. Marshal Strakens, commander-in-chief of Ruritanian army. Madame Antoinette de Maubert, a handsome and rich widow of France who is above 30, interested in Duke of Streltsov, whereas Bertrand was interested in her. So those are the king's men. And the main two of them, Colonel Sapt, Fritz, and Fritz. Okay, Michael's men. The six, a group of six resolute and unscrupulous gentlemen in the service of Black Michael, including three Ruritanians named Longram, Krafstein, and Robert of Hainsou, and three foreigners, including Du Gutat from France, Bersanin from Belgium, and Dutchard from England. Robert of Hainsou is by far the most daring and dangerous of the six. Johann, Black Michael's gamekeeper on the Zenda estate. Max Holf, Johann's brother and Duke of Streltsov's body servant. Joseph, one of King Rodolph's domestic servants. And we have to, those are the men of Michael. And we have some other characters in the novel, but whose names are not told. Okay, let's now have a summary and main events from chapter 1 to chapter 4. Okay. Rodolph Rassendyll was a charming, well-educated 29-year-old gentleman who lived in London with his brother, Robert, and his sister-in-law, Rose. Rose was always harassing Rodolph to do something useful with his life. She was proud of her husband as he led a useful, worthwhile life, but was angry with her brother-in-law for wasting his time in swordplay and enjoyment. Rodolph did not see the need to work. He lived quite comfortably on the 2,000 pounds a year inheritance left to him by his parents when they died. Rose often argued with Rodolph, and he in turn enjoyed teasing her. Rodolph had the dark red hair and long straight nose of the Elphaba family, whilst his brother had black hair and dark eyes, much to the relief of Rose. A portrait of Countess Amelia hung in the breakfast room. She had caused a scandal in 1733 by falling in love with Prince Rodolph III of Ruritania, who just happened to have dark red hair and a long straight nose. Amelia's husband discovered the relationship, and Prince Rodolph returned to his own country. Amelia gave birth to a red-headed baby with a long straight nose, and these unusual features came out once every generation. It was Rodolph not his brother Robert, who had inherited these characteristics from the Countess. One morning, Rose informed Rodolph that a friend of theirs, Sir Jacob Brudile, was to take up a post of ambassador in 6 months' time and had invited Rodolph to work with him. Rodolph had no intention of accepting such a position, but agreed to consider the matter if he was offered the post in 6 months' time. On reading the newspaper, Rodolph was interested to find out about the ascension to the throne of the new king of Britannia. On an impulse, he decided to travel to Britannia and attend the coronation. Rodolph knew that Robert would not approve of his plan, so he told his family that he was traveling to the Tyre to research the inhabitants, flowers, fauna, and political climate of that area. On leaving England, Rodolph traveled first to Paris to visit his friend George Federley. They went to visit another friend, Bertrand, who told them about his love for the beautiful Antoinette de Maubert. Unfortunately, Antoinette did not even know of Bertrand's existence and was, in fact, very good friends with Michael, the Duke of Streltsov. Bertrand was heartbroken. Antoinette traveled on the same train as Rodolph to Ruritania from Paris, but they never spoke to one another, nor were they introduced. Rodolph decided to leave the train at Zenda, thinking it would be less crowded in the small town than in the capital city of Streltsov. He found a small inn run by an elderly woman and her 2 daughters. The topic of conversation throughout Zenda was about the upcoming coronation. Rodolph soon discovered that many of townspeople would have been happier if Michael was to be crowned king. Michael spent much of his time in Ruritania, ruling the country in his brother's absence. Few people even recognized the king because he traveled a great deal to foreign countries. Rodolph was surprised to learn that Michael wanted to marry his cousin Princess Flavia, but that she was planning to marry his brother and become queen. Rodolph walked through the village to the castle and noticed that the castle was in 2 sections, surrounded by a moat, connected by a drawbridge. When the drawbridge was raised, the castle was safe from attack. After walking for a while in the heat, Rodolph sat down, leaned against a tree, and fell asleep. Some time later, he was awoken by the sound of voices. On opening his eyes, he saw 2 men standing before him. He quickly stood and introduced himself. The men introduced themselves as well and explained that they were in the service of the King of Ruritania. The 3 men were soon joined by the King of Ruritania, who was very surprised to see a man standing before him who looked exactly the same as him. Rodolph quickly introduced himself to the king, who was delighted to meet his cousin from England. Rodolph accompanied the king to Michael's hunting lodge, where they ate supper together. The king drank many glasses of wine, and as they were about to retire to bed, a servant presented the king with a special bottle of wine sent as a gift from his brother. Michael. Once the king had finished the entire bottle, he fell asleep with his head on the table. The next morning, the servants could not rouse the king from his deep sleep. In desperation, Sapt woke up Rodolph by throwing a cold bucket of water over him. Sapt panicked. He shouted to the others that he could not wake the king. Rodolph wanted to send for a doctor, but Sapt would not allow it. He suspected that the wine had been drugged. Sapt and Fritz persuaded Rodolph to travel to Streltsau and pretend to be the king at the coronation. Rodolph repeatedly refused, but eventually agreed, knowing that it would be the best thing for the people of Britannia. If king was not crowned that day, then Michael might sit in the throne. With Michael in power, the king could be imprisoned for life or even killed. Rodolph shaved off his beard and mustache, and the king was carried to the wine cellar where he was locked in for his own safety. Sapt, Fritz, and Rodolph rode into the capital of Britannia to the sound of cathedral bells, an army band, and cheers from people. The famous Marshal Strakens and the Chancellor of the kingdom met Rodolph. Although Michael was nowhere to be seen, people lined the streets trying to catch a glimpse of their new king. Rodolph looked up and found that he was staring into the eyes of the beautiful Antoinette de Maubert. As she leaned towards him, he was sure that she would recognize that he was not the king and expose him as an impostor, but she said nothing and he rode on. On the cathedral steps stood the cardinal and the beautiful Princess Flavia. Next to her was the king's brother, Black Michael, who paled when he saw Rodolph arrived. He was suspicious of the man, because he knew that he had drugged the king the night before. He had been certain that the king would be unable to attend his coronation. After the coronation and with the royal crown still on his head, Rodolph rode in the royal carriage back to the palace with the princess. He was startled when she expressed her surprise at the way he looked and behaved with her. That night, Rodolph and Sapt made arrangements for their return to Zenda and for the rightful king to ride into Streltsau the following morning. They left the city under the cover of darkness and arrived in Zenda around 9 o'clock. With Michael and his bodyguard close behind them, on their way to the castle. At the hunting lodge, they found the door to the cellar swung open and the body of the servant lying on the floor. The king was nowhere to be found, and Rodolph suspected that Michael was holding the king at the castle. There was nothing else they could do but to return to the capital and let Rodolph carry on the charade of impersonating the king. As they were about to leave the hunting lodge, 8 men approached them from the road. Sapt and Rodolph drew their swords and killed 3 of them before managing to escape into the night. That was the summary and the main events of chapters from 1 to 4. Now, let's identify the main themes that were in chapters from 1 to 4. The first theme we have here, theme of deception. Theme of deception here, we are going to mention situations that show that theme. Of course, we have a lot of situations in the novel that show theme of deception, but we are going now to mention the situation that showed that in chapters from 1 to 4. Theme of deception. Theme of deception was presented when Duke Michael sent the drugged wine to King Rodolph that prevented him from attending the coronation. Duke Michael had planned for this in order to sit on the throne and to be the king of Ruritania instead of his brother. He also wanted to marry his brother's fiancée, Princess Flavia. Moreover, he planned to kidnap the king and kill him. So, this situation shows theme of deception. Let's move to the next. Another theme shown in chapters from 1 to 4, theme of wisdom. Theme of wisdom was presented when Colonel Sapt realized that something was bigger than chance that sent Rodolph Rasendal to Ruritania. Sapt thought of a good plan to save King Rodolph and the throne from Black Michael. He planned to make Rodolph Rasendal shave his beard to impersonate the king and attend the coronation instead of him. Another situation. Theme of wisdom was presented when Sapt and Rodolph didn't find the king in the cellar, and Sapt realized that it was impossible to explain anything to people because people would be angry and they might kill them. He thought that they had to continue their plan, and Rodolph had to return to Strelso to prevent Michael from sitting on the throne. He also thought that Michael couldn't speak out against the king unless he produced the real king, or he would expose himself that he kidnapped the king and murdered his servants. Now, let's have the character analysis. We are going to deal with 3 characters in chapters from 1 to 4. Rodolph Rasendal, first, Rodolph Rasendal. Rodolph Rasendal was loyal, brave, and adventurous. He agreed to impersonate the king and risk his life in order to rescue the king and his throne from Black Michael. Rodolph also showed great bravery as a swordsman when he wanted to make company to the murdered servant of the king by fighting Duke Michael's men. He was secretive, careful, and accurate while playing the role of the king so that no one could notice the difference between him and the real king. Colonel Sapt. Sapt was faithful, brave, wise, and good planner. He realized that something was bigger than chance that sent Rodolph Rasendal to Ruritania. Sapt thought of a good plan to save King Rodolph and the throne from Black Michael. He planned to make Rodolph Rasendal shave his beard to impersonate the king and attend the coronation instead of him. He was also a good counselor to Rodolph. He always tried to instruct and guide him how to behave as a king so that no one could notice the difference between him and the real king. The last character here, Duke Michael. Michael was deceitful, traitor, and cunning. He planned to drug the king by sending him a drugged wine in order to prevent him from attending the coronation. He wanted to sit on the throne to be the king and marry Princess Flavia instead of him. He also planned to kidnap the king and kill him. That was the summary. Here in this video, we have finished the summary of chapters from 1 to 4 and the main themes and the character analysis in the 4 chapters. Thanks for good listening and goodbye.